Be nice to your mother and always say please. Be loyal to friends and compost your enemies. Be nice to your mother and always say please. Be loyal to friends and compost your enemies. Good evening, everybody. I know I don't give you any warning for these. No warning at all. At a time you don't expect it. Here I am. I just show up. I was planning to be on here at 8 o'clock, and I haven't figured out how to schedule a live stream properly, which is good because I never show up on time anyways. But I'm kind of excited. Had an extremely great blessing 10 years ago. Actually, let me back up. My blessing was actually 13 years ago, and the culmination of what it turned into was 10 years ago. So the blessing did not look like a blessing to begin with. You've all seen my videos, I'm sure, or most of you. Some of you, I'm sure, are new, but there is a story that I have told many times about in 2012 when we picked up a double load of composted manure and we spread it across our garden beds, across the food forest, down a 100-foot row of blackberry plants that I had paid $9 a piece for. Every 3 feet, so it was like 30, I think I bought 32 blackberry plants at $9 a piece, so you could do the math. That's not very good. $288 or something like that of thornless blackberries. I decided to make a hedge, but anyhow, I wanted to do the best to garden organically, and So I got some composted manure. Manure is like the best thing that you could put on your garden. So now you guys know what's coming, right? Yeah, the manure was contaminated, but I didn't know that to begin with, so I spread it everywhere, and I put it in our annual garden beds, and I was going to have the best gardening year yet. It was coming into our second year in a house that we had bought, a foreclosure home we had bought in north central Florida. And I thought, this year we're really going to get started off well. And my uncle had bought manure previously from this place the year before and grew a great garden on it. Beautiful gardens. So I thought, well, you know what? I'll do the same thing. I'll get 2 great big scoops of manure, and my uncle actually lent his trailer, and he actually, we went and picked it up together, dumped a big pile of manure in the front yard, nice crumbly. Not too hot, you know, not hot. It's been composting since probably the previous summer at some point. Great big pile at a dairy farm, and they loaded it up with a scoop, and we paid our $60 or something like that for it. Spread it all over the place. And within a week or two, after we'd watered it in, the leaves on some of the blackberries started curling, and the leaves on some of the transplants that I had very happily planted into our now wonderfully amended garden beds. I had started tomatoes, eggplant, and tobacco, and a few other things, and we put them in there, and the leaves started to curl. Now, they didn't just turn brown or yellow or die or anything. The plants actually looked pretty green and happy. They actually seemed like they liked the manure. They were green, but they all started curling. And so I thought, what in the world? I thought maybe it was a virus or something. And I thought maybe could the manure be too hot? I don't think so. Too much nitrogen? It doesn't, it's like weird. It's like this weird twisted growth at the end. So the old leaves were fine, but the new leaves, as they started to grow, started to do this weird twisty thing like this. They just get gnarled up. Like they had rheumatoid arthritis, and they had just gone like this. So this is so weird. Couldn't be a virus because it's Rosaceae family, and the beans started doing it, and so there's Fabaceae, Rosaceae, and then the Solanaceae, the eggplants, and the tomatoes, they were all curling up. What in the world is going on? What did I do? I called the local extension office and said, could this be a virus? What could this be? And they said, well, maybe the manure is too hot, or maybe it's a virus or something. I said, but it's all the plants. And he says, I don't really know what that would be. So I did some more research. Leaves curling. And then I was thinking, wait a minute. I mean, the only thing that was in common for all of them, it didn't hit me. I was like, duh. The only thing that was in common is that I had amended everything with the same stuff. This manure. So it was like, manure causes leaf curling. And then I come across a story of a community garden in England that had been wrecked by some sort of a persistent herbicide that had gone through in manure or compost that they had bought and spread around their allotments. It's like, oh no. This could be bad. So I figured, okay, I'm going to call the dairy owner and ask him. And he was a really nice older guy. I was like, hey, I bought a couple loads of manure from you, and I'm having this weird problem with my plants where the leaves are curling. Oh, I don't know what to call that. Nobody said anything. Everybody always loves our manure. You know, we've been selling it for years. You know, it's kind of a little side business we have. I said, yeah. I said, I know. I said, have you ever sprayed anything? No, I don't remember we sprayed anything. Well, you know, come to think of it, he said last summer we sprayed some stuff the university recommended. It's something. He says it does a real good job getting rid of the pigweed and everything. He goes, but that was way back. You know, that was back in the middle of summer. I can't imagine. I said, well, I don't know either. I said, it's just kind of strange. I said, the only thing in common is the manure. And I said, I don't want to give you a hard time or anything, but could you let me know what it was that you sprayed? So he sent me a picture. Very kind guy. He had no idea either. No blame there. He sent me a picture of the label. Oh, it was a persistent thing. It's called aminopyrrolid. A persistent thing. The horrible persistent thing. Aminopyrrolid. Yep, sure enough, that's the same stuff that got that garden, that community garden. So as I looked it up, it takes care of broadleaf weeds. It is persistent. It treats your pasture, I guess, for the year or so. But what happens is that this molecule inhibits the stacking function of plants, and it causes them to curl up and fail to produce. So, wow. This is nasty stuff. It's especially nasty, I thought, because composting didn't destroy it, and composting is usually really good at binding up toxins. I don't really worry about composting some paper shreds or composting, you know, oleander or something like that, because generally all of those toxins that might be dangerous when you first get it break down. Even if you take pure human waste, humanure, as Joseph Jenkins calls it, pure human waste, and you throw it into a hot compost pile, usually within 3 days, most of the E. coli is destroyed, because composting and all the different organisms that come in and they start getting in there, you know, they tear it up and they break it down, and they break it down into wonderful, usable humus for your garden. But not only that, a cow's stomach is one of the best composting machines in the entire world. They have that 4-part system of breaking down this hard, rough material that we can't digest. We don't have the digestion for it. And cow manure is already very composted by the time it comes out. It's actually a hot compost system. There are enzymes, there are bacteria, there are all kinds of things. Cow manure is great. It still can be a little too high in nitrogen or too high in salts, but it's very, very broken down. If you look at what the cow eats compared to what comes out the other end, it's not like horse. You know, you don't usually see a lot of seeds and bits of shredded material. It's actually really, really broken down by the time it comes out of a cow. And of course they chew it, and then they re-chew it, and they swallow it again. You know, they chew their cud, etc. So it's so good. Such great composting machines. But it could go through the stomach, it could be taken up in the grass, go through the stomach of a cow, get swept up into a big pile, and then sit and compost for months, then get spread on my garden and still kill it. Wow, that's a persistent molecule. It's science. Thank you, science. So I realize now I was sick to my stomach. I felt so beat. I had built raised beds. I had planted all of these beautiful blackberries. And not only that, I had given some of the manure to a master gardener friend of mine. She came over and took a few 5-gallon buckets for her little tomato patch. So I thought, well, I'll call her too and see if she sees anything. That'll confirm it was the manure. Well, sure enough, she says, you know what? I've never seen this before, but some of my tomatoes are starting to curl up. I'm like, sorry, Joe. Sorry, Joe. Yeah, so I told her what I had found out, and I scraped the manure out of the beds as best as I can. But that was pretty much it for that year's gardening. That was it for the entire row of blackberries. The weird thing is that they lived for a very long time in this weird twisted state without dying. It didn't kill them right away like Roundup would, but it got them all twisty, and they could not produce new growth. They just made this weird twisty knobs where they were trying to push new growth because the cell stacking function was inhibited. Terrible, right? So this was obnoxious. I was already writing some garden articles at that point. I had been gardening for years and years. I loved my garden. I wanted to do things organically. I wanted to do things the right way. I was not the kind of person to just throw 10-10-10 around or break out the Miracle-Gro. I wanted to do everything organically as possible, but I got betrayed. That experience helped me really to realize that I couldn't rely on outside sources. I needed to double down on my composting. And I had experimented with composting for years. Like, we had been extreme composters already. We had a dishwasher that we raised worms in. An old dishwasher, turned it on its back, put drains underneath, put a bucket underneath the drain, and we could use that worm tea and we could harvest castings out of it. Super cheap, red wigglers, you know, in a old dishwasher. I had a old freezer at a previous property that I had raised worms in. We had taken the toilets out of a previous house and replaced them. We actually had only one toilet. We had a little tiny house, and we put a composting toilet in it, and I had a big compost bin in the backyard. The neighbors never knew what we were doing or how horrible people we were, but we composted very safely without bad smell, etc., following the Humanure Handbook guide. We had dug pits and buried slaughter waste and planted on top of it. We had done deep mulching. I had made a deal with the local Lowe's that I would come and sweep up their lot and take all of the hay and straw and fallen alfalfa, etc. We were in an area where they actually had like a big trailer out there where they sold to the local farms various feeds, and I would just go and sweep it up. And then I did the same thing when we moved to the new property with one of the local feed stores. They would let me come and sweep at the end of the day and take all of that stuff. So I saved them sweeping it, but I just, you know, put it all on there. So alright, you are banned. I'm not going to listen to this craziness here. So, if you look at all of what we were doing, we were really breaking out of the normal waste stream and doing our best. Yeah, he's banished from the channel now. Boom, gone. But if you look at what we were doing, it looked like we were doing the right thing, and we were doing a kind of a community thing. The local place was producing milk and beef, and they had this manure. I was like, I want to support this local guy. I wasn't buying the bag manure or driving to Home Depot or Lowe's or something. I was like, I'm going to support this local farmer. This is cool. And I was going to the local feed store, and I would buy from them, but I would also sweep the lot and compost. But then when I got hit with that manure, I started looking around going, oh, woo, boy. What else could be contaminated? So I found out that hay and straw could also be contaminated. So I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. And then after I had my issue, another friend of mine named Andy, she told me that she spread hay around her rare Chinese herb garden because she was very much into Chinese herbalism. And some of her plants started to twist. I was like, okay, it's the same stuff. I'm really sorry. She took all that hay out there and got rid of it. But she said, they told me they never sprayed anything. And then I can't tell you how many people after that, they said, hey, my neighbor's got horses. They said I could take all the manure. And I said, where do you get the hay from? Oh, come on. Come on. So the hay supply is so completely corrupted that now if you feed your animals with hay from off-site, right, it could end up killing your garden. And you want to have this beautiful cycle, this wonderful, I'm raising this, and I feed it to my animals, and then I get the manure, and then I cycle that through. But if you break it at any point by going out and buying a big round bale of hay, you get a big round bale of hay for $60 or something like that, and you go, this is great. I can keep animals in a smaller lot. I don't have to have a large space. I can just feed them on this, and then I can mulch my garden with whatever rots and all the stable manure and everything, and the hay can get mixed together, and I can throw it out there. But then you end up inadvertently destroying your entire garden for the next couple of years because you did that. Come on. Come on. This is terrible. It's awful. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I need to find ways to stretch compost, to make more compost, and to try and feed my gardens without supplies that are being corrupted by industrial farming practices. So I figured out what stuff gets sprayed with it and what doesn't. There was a few things I was able to get, like wood chips from the companies that cleaned the sides of the road up, right? So it was a mix of hickory and oak and pines and cabbage palms and vines and whatever else got shredded in there. I couldn't find that stuff would be particularly contaminated. I guess occasionally they might spray a tree with something poisonous, but I never had any issues with wood chips, and I'd never heard of any issues with wood chips. So I was able to get some of those for the front yard and do some sheet mulching. I was also able to get a bunch of expired produce from somebody, and I would layer the expired produce and then pour wood chips on top of it and let it rot down. And then I upped my worm tea production, and then I started experimenting with various compost teas, because to make enough compost in piles to feed as big of a garden and food forest as I wanted was not that feasible. You have to do a lot. You have to get materials from somewhere. And if I couldn't get old rotten bales of hay and that kind of thing from off-site, I had an acre, which was a big yard for us. It was the biggest yard that we'd ever had. But it wasn't enough to get everything I wanted for multiple big garden beds in the backyard and a plant nursery, and then I had a couple of goats at one point, some chickens, and I just couldn't figure out how to do it all. So I kept experimenting with, how can I stretch compost? How can I make more compost? How can I do more compost? And I started writing about it. And then I realized, you know what? I bet a lot of people are going to be in the same situation. So I wrote a little book. It's actually a decent sized little book. Compost Everything. The Good Guide to Extreme Composting. So in the 3 years after that had happened, once I figured out how to get my composting up to the level where I was feeding the gardens, and I also tried other people's composting methods extensively for some years even before that, but it pushed me to say, I am going to write this book, Compost Everything. And I wrote this book, and I published it, and it became successful, and this was really the book that launched me as a writer. And so when I say that it was a blessing, it was a trial for us. It really made me upset. I was sick over the fact that we didn't have that much money, and I had spent all this money to put in some raised beds, and I had bought the manure, and I had planted a bunch of trees. It was really the cost of the plants, and then seeing all these plants that I really cared for, and I was picturing the little kids and I going along and picking these blackberries along this hedge, and I had cleared out an old hedge of hollies, replaced it with blackberries, and that year was going to be the year where it really just starts to take off. And it didn't. I killed it all. I killed 2 pecan trees. They kept coming back and trying to put on a few leaves, and then they died back. And then you put on a few leaves, and it would curl back. And it was like they kept trying every year to wake up and make, and they never outgrew it. Those poor trees sat there for something like 3 years and never did anything. Same thing with the blackberries. And in my garden beds, anything that was that year's garden that wasn't grass, that wasn't resistant, because grass family members are resistant to it, just did terribly. And of course I'm like, if anything grows out of here, do I even want to eat it? Come on. So I wrote Compost Everything. So this ended up being a blessing. But not only that, lots and lots of people have written me after I wrote this book and talked about how you saved me. I was just about to go and get a load of manure from such and such, and I read your book. Or I couldn't figure out what was wrong with the potted tomatoes that I had, and then I realized I was feeding them from, this manure or that manure or anything, and I was like, okay, so if it killed my garden, but maybe it saved a bunch of other people's gardens, that was providential. If you kill the garden, if you were God, and you're like, if I let this guy experience how bad this stuff is, he's going to warn a lot of other people later. That's a good trade. And so I realized it was providential because I had gone through that I could then turn around and warn other people and say, hey, look out. Don't get stuck with this thing. And it inspired me to write a book because it inspired me to get really serious about composting everything we had and figuring out how to make enough compost to feed our gardens. So that was 10 years ago that this book came out. It was published by a little publisher, and then later the rights reverted to me, and now I publish it. So if you look at it on Amazon, I put the link above if you want to get a copy. If you look at this book on Amazon, you'll see that it is published in, I think, 2021, but it's actually not published in 2021. It was published way back when, 2015. Compost Everything, and then it was republished by Good Books. So there's the little Good Books version. I have the original version, has a little bit different cover on it, and I don't think it has the dinosaur, because you could compost the dinosaur provided you could find one. And I thought that was important, because if you came across a dinosaur and perhaps you were menaced by it and you killed it and you were afraid that paleontologists might find out and get on your case, you need to know how to compost it. So, yeah, so there's a dinosaur in there. There's a cake. You should compost the cake instead of eating it. There's a bill. Yeah, you can compost your bills. There's a bone. Yes, you can compost bones. There's a fish. You can compost it. And then there's a plant. Obviously, you can compost that. But she is thinking now, what can I do to feed my garden? So, Compost Everything, the Good Guide to Extreme Composting. 10 years, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun to do a live stream and just say how that book came to be. So if you don't have the book, I'm going to give you a few tips from it. I'll give you the overview. It starts with 32 reasons to compost, continues with say goodbye to boring composting, goes to composting for anarchists, making your bed with sheet composting, redneck vermicomposting, composting with melon pits, composting human waste, make your own fish fertilizer, a mournful tale of manure, grow your own compost, dealing with stupid worthless trees, container gardening with compost, composting with chickens, and stretching your compost. And that one was actually really important to us because we really didn't have the compost that we needed. So, yes, this book just takes composting and it makes it into something that anybody can do on a backyard scale, small scale. We used principles from this when we were renting, when we were in an apartment, when we had more space, when we had less space. It breaks down composting into useful bite-sized pieces, and it doesn't tell you go buy a tumbler, go buy a thermometer. It explains how these things work, but really composting is all about throwing it on the ground and letting nature recycle it. So this is composting for people that ain't got time for that. So I'm going to take a few of these super chats really quick, and then we're going to get into a couple of ways you can stretch your compost. Leo Miranda Castro, my man, my Puerto Rican scientist friend who tolerates me, sends a $10 super chat and says, here's a little contribution to the Compost Your Enemies Fund. As you know, we compost our biggest enemies, the wild pigs, and now we have bacon-flavored tomatoes. Yes, thumbs up. Okay, so Leo is over in our school group where we share our gardening pictures and inspiration, and we do various challenges. Like we did a food forest challenge last fall. Right now we're doing the Grow 500 challenge, where we try to grow 500 pounds of food in a small backyard garden. So for people that haven't grown 500 pounds of food ever, this is the challenge. Can you make it? And then I'm giving away autographed books, and we're giving away gift certificates to my daughter's seed store and fun stuff like that. It's just like, let's see if we could do this. So this spring we started the Grow 500 challenge over in the school group. Actually, I'll put a link to the school group if anybody wants to join us. That is school.com/thesurvivalgardener. And I have the food forest course, the Florida gardening course, and a lot of my live talks and events that I don't put on YouTube. They go over there. So that is in lieu of Patreon. If you like what I'm doing, I don't do the Patreon thing anymore. I like the interaction that we can get at school, and it's much more of an educational platform, but it also allows us to post pictures and everything really well. So you can post a picture and say, hey, what's wrong with this plant? And we tell you it's dead, so it's really useful. But anyhow, Leo posted some pictures of his garden. He buried a bunch of fish at one point, and he planted amaranth in a bed without fish buried beneath it, and then amaranth in a bed that had fish buried beneath it. And the amaranth was like 6 foot tall on the one side and 2 foot on the other side. So you could see like cause and effect. And he also grew, he's got a problem with feral hogs, which a lot of people deal with, but he's got a decent sized piece of property with feral hogs. And they're very, very destructive, and the state does not want them destroying the ecosystem. So it's wide open hunting season all the time. But they're a big problem, and they're also dangerous. So he hunts those hogs. Some of them he eats and buries the leftover slaughter waste, but some of them are so rank and disgusting. He digs trenches and he buries the hogs and then gardens over the top of them. And the results that he's getting, he's got awful hard clay, sand, soil, acid, pineland type conditions, and prone to drought and everything else. And the hogs have ended up growing him a lot of vegetables. So he gets some pork, but sometimes even if he doesn't get pork, you get one of those big, stanky, nasty boars that is dangerous and destructive and everything. And you could turn it into tomatoes. So that is like extreme compost everything territory. And yes, compost your enemies. The hogs are your enemies. Bobbert sends a $10 super chat and says, thank you for writing the book. It definitely inspired me to compost as much as I can. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Bobbert. I appreciate you sticking around for so long. You've been on this channel forever and ever, and have always been an encouragement to me, so thank you. Cheryl sends a super chat and says, isn't it time for another good book? Yeah, I'd say it's about time. I am actually co-writing a book right now that I'm getting close to finishing my part of with Noah Sanders. Noah Sanders is a gardener, market gardener, garden teacher, small farmer who has some acreage in the hilly further northern part of Alabama, clay soil, very acid but fertile soil, and difficult conditions to grow in some ways because you get all the heat, but you also get more cold, but you also have just hills everywhere and lots of rocks. So it's different from where I am, but it's still Alabama. So the two of us are working on a book together called Alabama Survival Gardening. So what would you do if you lived in Alabama and you really needed to grow food? And so we have some different philosophies and different ideas, so we're meshing them together to give you an overall coverage. So he's covering the northern half of the state, I'm covering the southern half of the state. So that is in progress right now. And then I would like to finish my general good guide to food forests using my iterative design methods and my anarchistic approach to food forests and soil development. So the good guide to food forests, I have written on food forests before, but it's been for the state of Florida, and there's people everywhere that want an easier, less engineered food forest system. And so that's what I am working on. I am thinking I might do a Kickstarter for it or something and pre-sell it, which would give me motivation to actually finish it, because there would be a bunch of people waiting for copies, and it would also give me the ability to do more illustrations and things that I would like to do. So thank you, Cheryl, very much for the super chat and for the inspiration. And I noticed that you are an extreme supporter of this channel. You've got the double G, and I thank you for that. So Jesus says, I think this is the book I have. They're all in storage, so I can't check. And this has tied my book purchases in general for now. Yeah, I get it. I have a problem with buying books. So yeah. So this is Compost Everything. So let's talk about something that I put in here that people get confused about sometimes. Yeah, Bobbert says, how to compost by Bobbert. Throw it on the ground. That's basically the beginning of this book. Throw it on the ground. But I also talk about how to make fish fertilizer and a lot of other things. But one of the things that I found is, okay, you don't have enough to compost. If you don't have enough to compost, you're limited. So let's say you've got a 1/5 of an acre yard, or maybe you have a little 10th acre yard, or maybe you're borrowing a piece of land, and what are you going to do? You know, you got a bare piece of grass or something. Okay, well, you can get some grass clippings. Maybe you'll get some fall leaves, but you pile it all up and you compost it down, and if you're lucky, you get maybe a half of a 5-gallon bucket, or maybe a 5-gallon bucket of finished compost. Because it's remarkable when you start piling stuff up how fast it rots down. Especially, like one of you mentioned, you've got soldier flies. Soldier flies will often, they break that compost down really quickly, but they fly away with a lot of it. They eat it, and they turn it, you know, the maggots turn into flies, and then they fly away. So it actually gets all torn up really fast, and then they all fly away. So that is kind of breaking your compost and taking it away. It's really great if you could feed them to chickens, feed the larvae to chickens or something, but sometimes when you're composting with them, you're actually not getting that much compost in again. They do a really good job turning it and heating it up, but it just disappears. So what do you do when you only have a small amount of fertility? So if you were going to improve a big area, like let's say you're going to make a garden that's 10 by 20, and you say, well, you know, when you read on organic gardening books, or you read The Market Gardener, he talks about putting, you know, a 1/4 inch of compost over all the beds, or a 1/2 inch of compost, or more. You put, you know, 2 inches of compost on a bed, you're going to grow some great vegetables. Maybe you fork it and put it in there a little bit, or you lay it on top of the bed and then you mulch over it, and it's really rich and it works its way in, and it's got all that beautiful nutrition coming in. But what happens if you don't have that much? Because if you have a 5-gallon bucket of compost, that's about right for a 4-foot by 4-foot bed. So if you take all of it out of your 10th acre yard and you make compost, and it breaks down a pile into a 5-gallon bucket, and then you dump it on there, what do you got? Not much. A 4-foot by 4-foot bed. It's going to be a really great 4 foot by 4 foot bed, and I highly recommend putting a lot of compost on a bed if you can do it. But if you wanted to put in rows, and you just decided, I'm going to dump my compost on, maybe I'll fork it in, or maybe I'll mulch over it, depending on your method. That 5-gallon bucket doesn't go very far. You want a pickup bed full of compost. And if you're not buying materials from off-site, if you don't have a source of rotten hay that you know has never been sprayed, if you don't have stable manure, see, this is great when you have a little farm. Oh, it's easy. Oh, we make all our own compost. Well, that's great if you've got the acreage and you've got a farm and you've got you've got your cows or horses in the barn and you can get all this big mucked out area. Or you've ever seen those goat houses and then there's slats on the floor where the manure falls through at the ends. They just shoop, 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 and there's like piles of goat manure down the sides, and all the feed and everything falls down there, and then it rots. It's so beautiful. It's rich. It's wonderful. But you don't have that. Even your worm bin is giving you, a few quarts every, month or two. What are you going to do? How do you stretch it? That's when I started experimenting with the compost teas, but I was a little bit lazy with the compost tea. You'll see the compost tea where it's, you get an aerator and you bubble it, and then you add some of this and that and the other thing. You get some finished compost. You take your 5-gallon bucket of compost, you take some of it and you put it in a little. You try to find some pantyhose somewhere. I don't know where you find pantyhose anymore. You go back in time to Kmart in 1985 and you buy some pantyhose and you put it inside of there and you hang it down inside of it. You get some sort of a mesh and you hang it in there and you maybe shake it around in there and squeeze that compost goodness into the water and you keep it bubbling so it stays aerated, and then the next day or 2 days later you go and you pour that on your plants. That's really good stuff. But I was kind of lazy about it, and I was reading about how people made comfrey tea and let it rot down. Just throw comfrey tea in a barrel and let it rot, and then water with it, and you get great results. And how people make manure tea and they didn't necessarily aerate it. I said, well, all the minerals should still be in there, right? But it's anaerobic, and anaerobic is bad. That's what I heard. But beer is anaerobic, and it seems to be pretty good, at least for some people. I decided to just go ahead and take various weeds and take a little bit of chicken manure from the chickens and chop up a little bit of comfrey that I had and take some moringa that I had and just throw it all in there. And I also read that you could throw in urine and dilute it. So you could put some urine in the barrel too. It's kind of getting into gross territory, right? But you let it all sit there and stew. So I let this barrel sit there and stew for a few weeks, and then I said, I'm going to do a test. So I watered some potted plants with it. They loved it. They loved it. They went crazy. So I watered all the plants in my greenhouse with it, and they all did great. Now, did it have the proper bacteria, etc.? Who knows? I didn't care. I actually was doing it for the nutrients. And I was taking a small amount of material that would have made this much compost and putting it in a 55-gallon drum and then watering my plants with it. So, that was a way I could take a limited amount of fertility, right? So, you go fishing, right? You throw some fish guts into the bottom of a barrel. You top it off with water. I write about doing that too. I had a friend that would go to the Caribbean fish market. Talk about how to make your own fish fertilizer. He'd go to the Caribbean fish market before he visited me, and he would bring me a few buckets of disgusting fish guts and parts. Dump them in a bottom of a barrel and let them rot down, and then I would use it as a fish fertilizer. And after a few months, it actually doesn't smell that bad. Now, these compost teas usually do smell really bad when you first use them. And occasionally somebody has written me and said, man, I burned all my plants with it. Well, if you burned all your plants with it, you probably should have diluted it. So sometimes if you don't know how strong it is, you don't know if the plants are going to like it, You start by diluting it. Maybe you pour a cup or two into a watering can, top it off with some rainwater or from the hose or whatever. I guess, a little bit of chlorine in there, kind of chlorine deficiencies, right, in your plants. You go ahead and you water your plants with it. If it doesn't seem like it made any difference, maybe do it 50-50. If it still doesn't, look like it's doing much, just go full strength and see what happens. I found that bananas and corn, they just love it. Full strength. I just poured it along the bases of them, and they did great. So if I couldn't feed a patch of corn that was 40 foot by 20 foot with compost, I mean, that's a lot of compost to throw out there and then just have it, grow corn on it, especially when you're dealing with sandy Florida soil, which just seems to eat compost and make it disappear. I found that I could just get a 55-gallon drum, put a shovel full of chicken manure in there. You could pour some urine in it. I could put some fish guts in it. Whatever I had available. See, it's not like you have to have the chicken manure. You could just throw some fish in it. Or you could throw urine in it. Or you could just get a whole bunch of weeds and stuff it in there. I found that kudzu works really, really well. Throw kudzu in it. Kudzu's full of nitrogen. There's nitrogen-fixing trees. I could throw those in there. I could throw moringa in there. I could throw comfrey in there. Whatever I had available that I figured, well, the nutrients in those plants could go and feed my other plants. Pokeweed is a good one because it rots down really nicely. Then I just take it, dip the watering cans into it, and go water. After a few weeks, I could stretch compost extremely far. So that was one method to stretch compost. And you could use that right away. You don't have to buy my book, but if you buy my book, it would make me extremely happy because I think that, it has helped a lot of people so far. It's a worthwhile book. I stand behind it, and I'm very excited about it. 10 years later, I'd love to see it go back to the top of the bestseller list again. At one point, we actually hit the very top of the Amazon gardening section, which was super cool. Super cool. First came out, it was like, people love this book. I can't believe it. I sent it to everybody that I knew. Go buy this book. I guess my mom bought like 50 copies and put it up to the top. But you should be able to get the book. Yes, you should be able to get it in probably Amazon. The UK version of Amazon would probably ship it to Ireland. I know that it's available in most of the Amazon markets worldwide. You just probably couldn't use my link because it's the US link, but if you go and you search for it, you will find it there because somebody I know bought it in Malta. People have it in the UK. I've seen sales from India and elsewhere, so it's internationally published. It has international distribution, but you'll have to go to your local version of it to find it. You can also often go to like Barnes & Noble if you didn't want to buy it on Amazon. I think they carry it too. I think it's distributed through the independent bookstores as well. I tried to make sure that we could do all that. So being able to take the fertility, and particularly I'm big on not throwing stuff into a landfill if you can avoid it. I think the landfill system is really wasteful. It's impressive how they can build these big mountains of trash. I mean, it is cool to see all the vultures and everything. And it was the highest point where I grew up. We called it Mount Trashmore. My dad would take us up to the top of Mount Trashmore to watch fireworks. So if you could get up, if you could drive up the access road to the old dump, it was pretty impressive. But just to think of all the trash that's down there, and think of all the potential soil fertility that is getting mixed up with tin cans and plastic bags and broken trash and old toys and garbage and spoiled. If you could keep the food out of the waste stream, the meat, the eggs, the cake, the dinosaurs, right, all that stuff out of the waste stream, you're doing a big favor to the environment, but you're also being really smart because you're building soil and filling your garden up. So fill your garden with fertility. That's what you want. You don't want any fertility to leave your property if you can help it. Every banana peel, every eggshell, every chicken bone, if you can keep it on your property somehow, that's good. So that brings me to the second way that you could stretch fertility. If you can't make enough compost, you don't feel like you have enough land, you can't do it, concentrate your fertility right beneath the plant where they can get it. So our experiments with this were what I called melon pits. So you dig a pit and you dump something high fertility into it. Something that the plant shouldn't probably have directly on it. Like if you have chickens, you could put a couple of cups of chicken manure in the bottom of a 2 foot hole, or even a 1 foot hole. You could throw roadkill in there. You could throw human waste in there. You could throw fresh manure in there. You could do anything like that, right? Anything that you would go, ooh, if you've got leftover KFC bucket, just dump it in there. Close it over with dirt. Make your little mound on top and plant melons. Or plant a tomato on top of it, whatever. So you've got loose soil that's going down there, and hopefully you've buried it deep enough, it's not really a problem. But I call it a melon pit because we grew watermelons on them. But we've actually grown more compost pumpkins on them than anything else. So you could take something that you'd say, well, if I left this in my compost, maybe the dog would pull it out. If your dog doesn't want to dig 2 feet or 3 feet, it is a problem if you live in the country sometimes, or if a dog smells it, they may dig it up. But if it's something like, I found that if I put slaughter waste in the bottom and I dumped fresh manure on it, or chicken manure, or that kind of thing, it tended to keep the animals from digging it up. So this is a way to take something high fertility. Another thing you could do is, okay, let's say you don't have anything like that, but you did have some compost. You could bury some compost directly in the hole and put it right beneath that one plant. So instead of every single plant, all the ground in between, all having compost tilled into it or mulched over, you put a little bit of compost down there beneath where you want the roots to reach for it. You don't want them to be right on top of it. And you really don't want it to be on top of something that's really high fertility. Like if you put a handful of chicken manure and you just covered it with a little bit of dirt, you put a seed on top of it, that plant's just toast. But if it's further down, it can put its roots around it and then down into it and get what it needs. So we did an experiment with this when I was down in the tropics. I caught a rat in a trap and I dropped it into the hole that I dug in my garden, and I planted a Seminole pumpkin over the top of it, named after the Seminole Indian tribe. And I planted pumpkins around that area, and that particular pumpkin plant, it looked like the other pumpkins when it started to grow, but when it got about this tall, it started to really green up. And it ran like crazy, and it made some beautiful pumpkins. It did better than the other pumpkins because we buried an entire rat beneath it. See, nature is really good at recycling. And plants will take what they can from that without getting burned if it's down, further beneath. So it's a one of those ways where it's like, I have a little bit of fertility, but I don't have enough compost to go that far. So you take the material that you would bury in the middle of a hot compost pile, like a dead chicken, or some I would actually gather scraps from church dinners and then bury them and plant over them. So we had a big chicken dinner at church. I got a whole bunch of chicken bones and some leftover meat and everything. The kids don't eat it. They eat a little bit of a leg, and I'm done, I'm gonna do it, I can't eat it. All that stuff that gets thrown away, instead of getting thrown away, I had another trash can there. It was like food scraps. So I dig holes, I dump a bit of food scraps in one, dig a bit in there, a bit in there, a bit in there. Boom! Plant on top of it. Guess what? It's an entire year's worth of garden fertilizer. That plant runs like crazy. You get your watermelons, you get your pumpkins, you could plant corn on top of that station, you could plant a tomato on top of it, you could plant a tree on top of it. So when I did that song, I buried my rabbit neath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. The kids had a pet rabbit, and I buried the rabbit, and I started singing that song, and I actually made that song up on the spot, that part of it, and the kids were very distressed about that song. They were kind of sad, but later they thought it was funny. You know how dads are, but I thought, I literally planted a Barbados cherry on top of the kid's pet rabbit, the beloved rabbit, but rabbits die eventually. And, rabbits are very prone to dying, actually. So they had this beautiful, wonderful rabbit that they were friends with. The rabbit's name was Ruby. It was a very sweet rabbit. And one day, it just died. And so, well, let's lay it to rest. But we can still get another life out of it. We could grow cherries. And we grew a cherry tree on top of it. Dig it down deep, throw it in the bottom of the hole, cover it over, plant a fruit tree on top. So some of these opportunities for fertility in the soil pass us by, and we don't take them because our mindset has not been realigned to say, here is potential soil fertility I am throwing away. So this book, if you've been frustrated with your composting, if you've got an old tumbler in the backyard that never worked well for you, if you've never been able to get your compost pile hot, guess what? We're all in the same boat. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough compost for our gardens. Compost Everything, the Good Guide to Extreme Composting. It's worth thousands of dollars in future compost. I just made that number up. But anyhow, I put a link above. Please buy this book and get it back into the best-selling list if you don't have it yet. That would be a great 10-year anniversary. And like I said, I don't recommend something unless I believe in it. And this is years of experience. And this is just composting for people that ain't got time for that. So Compost Everything makes an extremely good gift. I got a link above. Now I am going to answer some questions. So that song makes me cry, especially the part with the tax man. I'm gonna let you guys ask some questions here, and I'm going to sing "Buried My Rabbit." Today my sinuses are a little packed. I don't sound as I don't have the normal nasal tone that I have. Normally I have a really rich nasal Yankee voice. I try to hide it since I live in the deep south, but the Yankee comes out sometimes. Buried my rabbit neath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. Someday I know that we'll meet again on the fruit salad spoon. Laid my hamster to rest last night beneath the pumpkin vine. Someday I know that we'll meet again in a Thanksgiving pie. If it dies when it's at my house, it'll end up in the soil. My trees are all fed by pets, shuffling off this mortal coil. Put my puppy beneath the garden bed one early winter morn. Someday I know that we'll meet again in a lovely row of corn. If it dies when it's at my house, it'll end up in the soil. My trees are all fed by pets, shuffling off this mortal coil. Laid the tax man to rest last night beneath a money tree. I know that we'll never meet again, 'cause he won't be in heaven with me. If it dies when it's at my house, it'll end up in the soil. My trees are all fed by pets, shuffling off this mortal coil. Buried my rabbit neath the cherry tree one fine afternoon. Someday I know that we'll meet again on a fruit salad spoon. That is Buried My Rabbit Neath the Cherry Tree here on NPR. Thank you guys. I greatly appreciate it. When's the next album? Good question. I need to record an album, probably after I write a book. Maybe. If you look for the David the Good Tunes channel, I have some music over there, but it's a side thing. I'm never going to be a rock star, so. Adventure Bob says, please, David, never wear that pig mask in any video again. Thank you from everyone. Wait a minute. How about like on live streams? Can we wear the pig mask on live streams? I don't know. Is this too much? Well, the thing is, as a pig, I've discovered that I'm made completely of bacon. It's an amazing thing that I don't just eat myself. It's so weird being a pig. It's so weird to be so tasty. Oh boy. I could go for some sausages. Okay, sorry for the kids out there. Sorry, kids. Sorry, kids. Illuminati confirmed. Okay. So, I'm gonna take some questions here. I'll be helpful. I'm gonna try to be helpful. We have a few minutes here. Oh, let's see. Oh, Carl says he planted a black cherry tree a couple of days ago and moved an old Meyer lemon that has struggled for years. Hopefully a new spot will help it wake up a bit. Yeah, sometimes they just need to move, and if they don't live, they die. And it's, just there you go. Greg says, can you give any tips on deep mulch gardening? I start today by putting cardboard down. Yeah, definitely. Make sure you water the ground really well beneath the cardboard. I think that helps. If you have anything that's a little bit high fertility to sprinkle on the ground beneath the cardboard, I think that also helps a little bit, helps break the grass down. So let's say you had some, cottonseed meal or some manure or something, you throw it on there. It's not necessary. I just do that when I have it. Lay your cardboard down, wet it really well, and then just build up as much as you can with whatever you have. I tend to, if I'm going to plant seeds in it, I punch a hole down through the layer and through the cardboard, make a pocket, make sure there's a little hole at the bottom down into the ground beneath, and then I'll pack it with some good soil, hopefully weed-free soil, like it could even be potting soil or compost or something like that, or you could sift compost out of the woods and put it on there, but something loose that you could plant a transplant in or plant seeds in, and then just let it grow in that pocket. So it grows into that high fertility and goes down into it. I've had really great luck with the deep mulch gardening. I use whatever we have. We've used layers of grass clippings, fall leaves, old manure. We've used wood chips. Basically anything we can get our hands on. I've even thrown kitchen scraps at the bottom of it. Like, I try not to put, I didn't put meat scraps or anything in there because I didn't want the animals tearing into the garden, but things like watermelon rinds and eggshells and stuff like that. So, William says, just bought the book. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you, Tim, too. There is a link to Compost Everything Above. For those of you that are just joining us, this is the 10-year anniversary of the publication of Compost Everything, the book that I wrote after going through a very bad experience with losing my gardens to composted manure that we brought onto our property. And it was a curse back then, but it ended up being a blessing because a lot of people have thrived and been able to grow better gardens because our garden failed that year. So our composting experiments and the way we worked around that damage helped. So Thank you, KevStar13. Aaron says tomatoes are about 7 foot so far, all natural. Good work. Bobber says, one of the best things I've learned from you is to plant annuals under my perennials. They share their fertility until the annuals die off. Cherry tomatoes under the grapes and such. Oh yeah, they do so well. They do so well. It's like the plants do better in community most of the time. Betty says, I'm pulling my cucumber plants. They've burned up. They grow on a cattle panel curved over the top of the garden area. If I plant purple beans, should I cover the panel with shade cloth, please? Well, it depends on your climate, Betty. If it's really hot, sometimes some varieties of beans just won't like it. You got to wait for it to cool down a little bit. I have found that the yard-long beans do really well in the heat right through the summer. Yard-long beans are from Southeast Asia. They can take brutal conditions that some of the other beans don't. But I don't think I would shade the beans. I don't think you need to, unless you have just brutal weather. Adventure Bob, yes, you do need a mulberry tree. Andrew says, this song helped me get over my cat that passed last October. I buried him under a persimmon tree that I got at Scrubfest. Ah, that's cool. A friend of mine was living in a rental some years ago, and he's a single guy, older, never got married, lived by himself, and he had adopted a cat from the neighborhood, and it was a good cat. It was really a great companion for him for multiple years. And then the cat got old and died. And he told me that the cat had died, or that the cat was sick and that he was dying, and I said, listen, if you want to bury the cat someplace good, I said, why don't you bring the cat over? We'll give him a good burial. He's a good cat. So I dug a hole in the backyard beneath the mulberry tree, or alongside a mulberry tree that was already there. And we said a prayer, and we thanked the Lord for having sent that cat to him, and we thanked the Lord for having taken the cat, and we committed his mortal remains to the soil and to that mulberry tree. And just being able to do that and to say goodbye, we're not throwing the cat in the trash, we're laying him to rest. And if there is a resurrection for cats, the cat will be there. So it was one of those, like, hey, we have a little piece of land, he doesn't, and it'll feed my mulberry tree. But I didn't actually say that at the thank you for the gift of your life and feeding my mulberry tree. Just seemed a little bit, but I mean, we're caretakers of animals, and it is a good thing to lay them to rest, especially if they mean something to you. I don't bother saying any last rites over squirrels. So, are we not men? All right, here we go. Where did we go? 16. Shawnee says, 10 by 30 garden has popcorn, beans for drying, carrots growing. The entire garden is turning into terrible grass and strange weed. I need a plan. Burn it all, tarp it all, and then cover crop. Well, yeah, burn it all, tarp it all, and cover crop sounds pretty good. But you could just tarp it all. You get to this time of year and it gets hot. Might as well take advantage of the fact that it's hot and it's miserable, and throw a tarp over the area and say goodbye. Once you've harvested out what you can harvest, and just cover that area and let the heat kill it off beneath the tarp. I use the DeWitt Sunbelt woven nursery fabric for that occasionally. If I just am sick of an area and I want to cover it and get a good clean growing area again and start over, that's what I do. Burning it tends to set it back for a bit and it tends to come back. Tarping it tends to kill it pretty well. But you especially want to make sure that it's not setting weeds if possible. Like the weeds are not setting seeds. Kevstar says, if I'm going to do some aerobic compost, how powerful of an aquarium pump should I be buying? I don't think it matters that much. Even a little bubbler should be enough. But I have Never bothered with it. I just don't bother with it. But I have seen little pumps. You know, a little pump will aerate a fish tank, and you're only going to be doing this for a couple of days. You keep those bubbles in there, it's going to be constantly dissolving that oxygen into the water. I don't think you have to have anything special. You don't need some huge pump. Just a little bitty pump. I could do shows at homestead festivals. I've sung occasionally. I've made people suffer. Bobbert said I buried my neighbor's puppies in my yard and grew pumpkins. I don't think I want to dig too deep into that, but have a good day, B. Oh, you know, oh, you're back. Yeah, it's man, bear, pig. Tim says I'm inspired. I have a pear tree tomorrow. I guess to plant tomorrow, and a bucket full of rabbit guts to get rid of. Oh yeah, do it, do it. Hey Joe, nice to see you. Smash that like button until your screen breaks. Will the bottom of my compost pile and potato slurry make for a nutritious aerated tea? Sure, it's probably full of nutrients. Do it. Do it. Thank you, Megan, for ordering compost everything. Order now. Operators are standing by. Compost everything. There's a link above. The composting book for people that ain't got time for that. And it's entertaining. It's funny. I try not to make boring books. I've thought about writing a boring book, and I just haven't been able to do it yet. Greg says I use grass clippings and pine chips. Good. I'll do it. Pine chips tend to be a little bit acid, so adding a little bit of pulverized limestone or lawn lime is probably not a bad idea. Pine chips, I've noticed, tend to yellow my plants out sometimes. They don't break down very fast, and they're also pretty acid. Have I ever grown rattlesnake beans? I'm growing them in place of regular green beans. I keep meaning to plant rattlesnake beans because I've seen multiple gardeners have great success with them. I've been to gardens and seen them just covering trellises, tons and tons of rattlesnake beans. And I keep saying, I'm going to do it next year. I've bought them a couple of times and I haven't planted them. I keep going back to the same old stuff I always grow. I really need to do it, but I bet you they do great for you. Aaron says, been composting everything in my walkways. I just moved leaves over and tossed food and cover. Worked great this year. Good. I'm sorry that your half your tomatoes died. My tomatoes die all the time. Mine are dead already, except for the Everglades tomatoes, which just go forever. Black-eyed peas do good in here. Oh yeah, they do good in the heat for sure. They can take it. Adventure Bob says, my corn is 12 to 15 foot tall, just starting to tassel, no sign of ears yet. Should I be concerned? Nah, it'll be alright. It should come out. You should start getting, the ears will start to show up like right along the sides pretty soon. Hopefully. Sometimes if they're too tight together, they don't do very well. I've had some varieties not set a lot of ears, but if it's good and green, I mean 12 to 15 foot tall, it sounds good. Carl says, I had some green, yellow, and purple bush beans, but they were only kind of so-so. Seem to get blight very early and often. Yeah, I've had a lot of problems with the bush beans here in lower Alabama. I had much better luck with them in further south in Florida. Let's see what we got here. Aaron says, black beans and black-eyed peas and pinto beans for ground cover working good so far this year. Yeah, I also go and I buy bags of mung beans from the Oriental Market. Those do really, really well as a cover bean. Nothing seems to hurt them. So they're a lot like the black-eyed peas. Oh, good job, Chef. I did the chop hardback and stripped all the leaves trick on one of our mulberry trees. And wow, massive harvest here in Isan, Thailand. Yeah, that's cool. You can reset them sometimes. I've thought about doing that this year. Adventure Bob gave up brewing tea with an aerator too. I know, I'm just too lazy. Like my composting methods are like, let's go easy. SS says, what's your view on adding native trees amongst fruit trees? I think it's a good idea. I like to pack some natives into my food forest systems too. I figured to have some habitat. I want the fruit for me, but there are some native fruits too that I've planted. But yeah, I'm in favor of it. I mixed in native plums. I put in Xanthus xylem, clava hercules, the Hercules Club tree. I put in some native crab apples. I have elderberries, some other things. Let's see what we got here. What's the coolest, most successful plant-to-plant graft project I've done? It would probably be grafting onto a Chickasaw plum. I grafted large fruits onto a Chickasaw tree, a large fruited plum variety onto it, and it made big fruits on it. I also grafted nectarines and peaches onto Chickasaw plum. Now the grafts way outgrew the rootstock very rapidly, and I had to prop them up with poles that I hammered into the ground. But it was super cool to see this weedy looking little native plum with these great cool fruits on it. That was my coolest. I also grafted pear onto some native hawthorn, but I didn't get to follow up on that. I saw that the grafts took, but the native hawthorn was starting to grow around them when I checked up on them about 6 months after I did the grafts, but I never saw them again. I didn't get to go back to that property. It was I did them for somebody as an experiment. Is it okay to use Chinese poisonberry tree for chop and drop? I would think so. I mean, I chop and drop everything. Oh, thank you very much, Josh, for the super chat. Much appreciated. Josh sends a 19.99 super chat. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, B. Iron Butterfly says, have you grown sea buckthorn? I'm from Michigan, wondering if it grows in Florida. No, I have not planted it. It's not supposed to grow here. I haven't tried it yet. If I had some trees, I would try it, or some shrubs, I would try it. I have grown autumn olive here, which is a big pain up in Michigan, but down here it's not particularly invasive. I've never seen it spread. I had them for multiple years in an old food forest. Never saw a single seedling. But it still made fruit for me, even though the chill hours were really low. Alright, let's see. Shawnee says, question. Let's see. The Zone 5A4B, Minnesota, looking for more things to chop and drop. I have comfrey, does mint, stinging nettle, Mexican sunflower, work as chop and drop. Any suggestions? The Mexican sunflowers that I grow down here would not grow well where you are because they're a perennial. Probably the Mexican sunflower you would grow up there would be Tithonia rotundiflora, which is the one that makes the orange blooms. It'll work as a chop and drop, but it doesn't make a lot. Basically, whatever makes a lot of biomass in your area, just chop it down and throw it on the ground. So stinging nettle, definitely. If it's something that doesn't reroot and start again, because that can be a problem with some stuff. But if it grows a lot of biomass quickly, and you can chop it and throw it around the trees, even your native grasses, you let them grow tall. Your native weeds, you let them grow tall. You chop them and throw them on the ground. Comfrey is definitely a good one there because it likes the cold. But I can't think of any large, fleshy plants that might be good for it. Just use what you can. Tim, for a consultation, write me an email. I do really in-depth consultations. So it depends on how in-depth you want to go. I usually write a six-page report on the property, take photos, visit, identify all the edibles, take a look at the soil, and do all that. So it's just going to depend on how big the property is and how far I have to go. And it usually takes me a few days of work to write the report up and do the travel and the visit and make sure that I answer every single one of the questions. I actually write it up basically as a personalized essay guide to developing your property. I could do a straight consultation where I just answer questions on the phone or something like that, which is not as expensive, but I do like in-depth property consulting. So if you like want to launch a homestead and make sure that everything is optimized, I can do that, or we could just dial it back. But if you're within a couple of hours, usually it's quite possible. So I just dropped my email in the chat. We could talk and figure it out. Figure out how far you want to go and what you need done. I like to make sure that if I'm going to do a consultation that it's going to be successful. And I've done as much, like, we've really got a good idea for the property. I've got all my photos and everything lined up, and then if you do hire me for a consultation, I usually just continue to answer emails afterwards, because I like to follow up for the next year or so and make sure that, like, this property is flying. And I've never had anybody say, "Oh goodness, I wish you hadn't done a consultation for me," because I approach it like I approach writing a book. I do all my research and dig into it. Let's see. Angel says I just got caught up to the pig mask. Stephanie says in the YCC Youth Conservation Corps in Virginia in the 70s, we planted tons of autumn olives. Yeah, they used to be used for all that bad, the mine areas, mine reclamation and everything. They fix nitrogen. Now they're like, oh, it's an invasive. You don't want that. I grew from seed of a calamansi fruit tree. The tree I got it from had no thorns, but my seedling has thorns. Why do you think that is? 1 second. That is the calamansi. Oh, I know exactly. Okay, calamansi. Yeah, calamondid. Okay, this is a very interesting thing. Citrus trees, when they are seedlings, grow a lot of thorns on them. When they get taller, the thorns disappear. Higher up in the tree, the thorns disappear. So if you get a grafted tree, it starts from a piece that's higher up in the tree, a mature tree that's no longer making the thorns. So the grafted tree may not have thorns, or it may have minimal thorns compared to a seedling tree. A seedling tree starts out insanely thorny and gets less thorny as it gets bigger. This is a protection. It was designed to be protected against grazing animals and being destroyed. So animals don't want to come and rub up against it, knock it over, and chew it down. So it protects itself. But if you get a graft, it thinks it's already a mature tree and it doesn't need the thorns. So you're starting with a mature piece that is past the thorny stage and restarting it as a baby tree. So if you planted a seed, yeah, you would get an extremely thorny tree. But as it gets taller, it'll be less thorny up top. But a thorny tree is actually not a bad thing. A seedling tree is really tough. And my calamondin fruited in about 3 years of age from seed. They could grow really well. So, hey Clay, nice to see you. All right, let's see here. The Windmill Garden says, I've been planting wild mulberries around my garden that birds plant. Is there any way to tell which are male trees when they're very small? No, not that I know of. But if they grow up and they fruit and they're a male tree, you can always cut them down and graft a female on top of it and change the sex of the tree. Online consultations possible for the not wealthy. LOL. I'll tell you what, it's much better to do consultations for people that are extremely wealthy. I haven't gotten any yet, but I like the idea. I see some people building these huge projects, and I'm like, I could have saved them $50,000 if they hired me. Just give me 25. I'll save you 50. Some of these big development projects, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be a sink. That is so expensive to maintain. I wish they hadn't have done that, but it's often when there's grant money or something, it's just being wasted and blown all over. But they never call me for those things. I never get called for that stuff. Most of my people live in double wides. They're people that are, those are my people. And that's fine. My background is poor. Yes, I can come to Mississippi. I'm not that far from Mississippi. Can you chop and drop goldenrod growing where power people sprayed herbicide? I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't want it. So, Sisolar says, evening, David. Any luck with those darn goji berry plants? Nope, not a single fruit. They've bloomed again. It's been 3 or 4 years of blooms and no fruit. Forget it. I'm done with them. I don't know what the deal is. I had goji berries fruit for me just fine in North Florida. They're not fruiting for me here. I don't know why. So, Adventure Bob says, I dislike the immaculate raised garden bed fantasy garden channels. I know. I like to look at it and I'm like, that looks really nice. That looks really nice. I'm not doing that. Any tips on growing corn? Yeah, I like to plant it at 3 foot wide, about 6 inches apart in the rows, and let the rain water it in, and give it as much fertility as you can manage, and you'll get more corn. Our corn has been grown with low fertility. That's in my daughter's seed store. That is, let me see here. She's got a lot of stuff in her seed store right now if you haven't been over there. Looks like she unlisted the corn. What is wrong with her? Just when we needed it. Yeah, watch there for the corn. I don't know. She must have sold out of the first round. I dried out a bunch of corn for her. She must have. I guess she must have sold it all. I've got piles of corn drying on a patio table on the front porch right now. It's pretty funny. Anyhow, you beautiful, wonderful people, I'm gonna call it. We went a little long today, but I'm excited. This is the 10-year anniversary of the publication of Compost Everything. Buy this book. Just buy this book. If you've struggled with composting, buy my book. I'm not recommending a book that isn't practical. This is composting for people that ain't got time for that, and it's methods that work in a tiny space, methods that would work in a larger space, and it helps you avoid the pitfalls of getting poisonous materials brought into your property or having to buy stuff. So this is your keep it out of the landfill, use every bit of organic material you can get to feed your garden and stretch it, and it's extremely, extremely practical, and it's funny, and it's down to earth. There is a link at the top of the chat. Compost Everything, the good guide to extreme composting. So thank you all very much. Thank you for putting up with me hawking my books. I am so blessed that my garden was destroyed years ago, and it inspired me to write that book. If I hadn't had that amino pyrrolid laced manure that just slapped me upside the head and said, hey, you can't rely on other people, particularly not on factory farm corporate stuff, to feed your garden. You're just going to have to grow food for your family without that stuff. If I hadn't have been slapped upside the head in 2012, I wouldn't have written that book and had it published in 2015. And I might not have this gardening channel either, because after I wrote that book, people started saying, why don't you do more videos? You should really do videos. You should really do videos. That's when I started to take the video channel seriously and then just demonstrate some of the things that we did. So the machete I use, I do not have a link. It is called a Martindale Mongoose machete, and I cannot find a link inside of the US. I bought it in the Caribbean, but if you can't get that, get a Tramontina, and not a long one. A shorter blade like that is better than the longer one, because you're going to be doing a lot of tight work in your garden usually, and I just find it to be more useful. I don't need a gigantic machete. Maybe if I was slashing down banana stalks or something like that, but Tramontina makes good machetes. Highly recommend them. Have a very good night. Compost Everything, the good guide to extreme composting. There's a link at the top of the chat, and I'll put a link below this video when I get around to it. Thank you all for watching. I hope that those tips will be useful to you, and thank you for the entertainment and the encouragement, and thank you very much for the super chats. Much appreciated. That was very kind of you. And thank you, Bobbert, for the $2 thank you for the stream super chat. Yes, I will stream for super chats. So have a very good night. God bless you and keep you. Stay safe in your garden. And until next time, may your thumbs always be